Hi, everyone. Roger Connect, president of Universal Accounting Center. And today we're going to be listening to and discussing with Damon Yudichak his services and what he's doing within his firm to actually differentiate himself from his competition, and really the story and journey he's experienced as he's had the time to start and build his firm. His company is Yudichak CPA. He is the owner and founder. And first of all, thank you, Damon, for being on the call today.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's always fun to kind of tell war stories, for lack of a better word.
War stories may be very appropriate for some of us. So let's just kind of get into the beginnings of all this. Obviously, I always like to start with people's background and experiences and what drew you to the accounting profession. So give us an insight as to how this all started, what drew you to accounting, and really where you got your experience and background.
Well, when I went to college initially, I was planning on going towards a medicine track. And then after organic chemistry, realized that I didn't do well in it, particularly because I didn't do the upfront work. And it's so layered that if you get behind in week one, the semester's gone. And I was... And so then I had taken a business class, and after that second year of college, I was really kind of didn't know where I wanted to go. I worked a little bit as a telephone interviewer within market research.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I did that for about 6 months and realized that I was kind of in a dead-end situation. And that led me to enlisting in the Army. I did a 3-year enlistment, and about 2 years in, I knew that I wanted to go back to college, and I had taken a business course in my previous college and felt like I wanted to do something business related. I also wanted to get a degree in something that was going to be a career, for lack of a better word. I felt like business was going to be too general. And so I took 2 accounting classes in night school while I was in the Army, and I liked it. And essentially that's kind of what led me into accounting, and when I got done with my enlistment there, I went to NC State and got my bachelor's in accounting.
Very good. So one of the things that I want to do is first and foremost start by thanking you for your service. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Phenomenal.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And then as for your journey, I think a lot of people do relate to it, because so often I speak to people who ultimately become accounting professionals, CPAs and the like, but their journey is kind of a one of finding themselves. It's not like this is a clear defined role. And like you're sharing, it's just one of those where you just step by step methodically found yourself moving in this direction. So what was it that drew you to accounting, that you liked it once you started getting into it?
Well, initially I liked that things, you got a clear answer. And that was, your balance sheet always balanced. And so there was a way to come up with an answer that was definable. What I didn't realize as I was going through those courses was that there was a lot of problem solving later on that I would get to that didn't have clear answers. I enjoyed it. The accounting just made sense for me. And again, getting back to, I knew I wanted to do something business related. I knew that accounting was important to business. And I've always kind of been drawn to a technical aspect. So I think those all kind of lined up. And even when I did assessments on careers and all that stuff, accounting always ranked pretty high on good career fits for me.
Good, good. So one of the things that I heard there, and I think a lot of people also appreciate, is the fact that accounting, it does have initially at the very beginning this allure of being clear and definitive. You know, 2 plus 2
Yeah.
being 4 all the time, and there's a lot to be said about having that balanced
Hmm.
balance sheet. So what we want to do is recognize that that's kind of alluring because it eliminates a lot of this abstract nature. But as you further yourself within the career and you get into forensics, forensic
Yeah.
accounting or audit, and then you get into budgeting or planning, it really does kind of lend itself to the creative side of
Yeah.
things. And you start thinking outside the box and realize there's more than one way to do this. And that's where it gets, I think, really exciting after you get that foundation. So it almost comes alive at that point. So that's
I
quite interesting. So obviously you finish up your college. How did your career start from maybe perhaps an employment point of view? Where did you see that journey beginning?
Well, one other thing I want to add in here is that while I was in college, I bought a commercial cleaning business, and so that was kind of one of those things where I got to actually firsthand learn kind of the running a small business. And so I was doing that throughout college and making decent money at the time. I started my first accounting job was one of my cleaning clients who was a CPA firm. He hired me to work a tax season,
Hmm.
and after that tax season, as is typical, he didn't have work for me. But he had a client that was an engineer in the civil engineering world that was needing an accountant. Before I got that job though, I was one of my while I was in the reserves as well, and one of my reserve colleagues worked for a um, HVAC supplier,
Okay.
and so I got a job with him. I accepted a full-time position, and then uh, a, about a month later, I got this other position at the engineering firm that paid, I think it was $8,000 more a year. So that was hard to turn down. So I made that switch. And so I worked as mainly in the billing and accounts receivable situation in that company. I did that for about a year. I realized that it was a small company. I think we had 25 employees. There were 3 in the accounting department, my supervisor, and then there was an AP specialist. But I realized that, or at least I felt at the time, that I wasn't going to progress in my career as far as the business is related. I felt like getting an MBA at the time was the next step. And so I started a part-time program at NC State where I worked full-time and then went to school at night. After 2 years of working with the engineer company, I went on and worked in the audit division of a local CPA firm. And that gave me the 1 year of work experience I needed to get my CPA. I realized after a year of that I wasn't a good auditor, and I didn't enjoy it either. It was too precise for my liking. At that point, I was finishing up my graduate degree in 2008. I actually had gotten let go because I kind of burned myself out, as you can imagine, working full time and working and going to school full time or part time. I mean, it was 15 to 20 hours a week. So on the personal side, I kind of burned myself out, which led to me not being the kind of employee that they needed at an audit department. And so while that was kind of defeating to a certain extent, I realized that there was a need for me to reevaluate the way I approached work. And I need to make sure that I was being valuable to those I was working for. The end piece of that was I kind of killed my career because I wasn't the best employee. And I felt at the time the only option I had was to start a CPA firm. And this being in 2008, was when I graduated from the MBA program. I was really up the creek without a paddle. And I decided to take the CPA exam because I knew that was going to be a huge, valuable thing for my career. I had previously failed it twice, and I focused really hard on passing the exam, and I passed it that time. And little by little, I did a lot of networking to try and get clients. It took a lot longer than I would have liked, but that was just the state of the things at that point. I think, though, that the pain that I had with getting fired really got me back to really making sure that I was focusing on being valuable to the people that were going to hire me when I look at the clients that hired me. So that one thing that was horrible at the time ended up probably being one of the best things in my life, or at least in my career.
Yeah. Now, I want to focus on that, but just because some people may be wondering the same thing I'm wondering, are you still at this point running the company that you owned, which was the cleaning company, or is that out of the picture at this point?
Well, my wife and I ran it when we first, we ran it for 7 or 8 years. I forget exactly how many years it was. It kind of dwindled because we started a family as well. And while I was going to college, I didn't keep up on getting new clients. And so we had attrition, just as naturally happens, And so when I finished graduate school, we had one client left, I believe, or 2 clients left at that time. And I knew I didn't want to work nights anymore. And I didn't really feel like building that business up either. So we did have it, but by the time I got done with graduate school, there wasn't much left. And so I kind of ended it up pretty close after I finished school.
Yeah. So one of the things that really strikes me with your story is the fact that a lot of the people that I work with, and many people that I'm sure are listening, can relate to the fact that there came this point in your life where, as uncomfortable as it was and as difficult as it was still that pivotal moment that allowed you to switch. Whereas if things were more comfortable, you probably wouldn't have transitioned as easily or would have had the momentum to really make what happened take place. So really, it's that pit that really drove you, because a lot of the people that I speak to, one of the things that's very clear is either they start and build their firms out of an opportunity, it's something they've wanted to do and longed to do, and they do it because they see the potential, but others do it out of a sense of necessity. They have to. And in fact, when talking to them, sometimes the whole idea of being an entrepreneur, having their own business, taking on clients, wasn't even something remotely interesting weeks or months prior, but it comes to a point in their life that it's perhaps the only or best thing that they can do. And like yourself, they just push through it, they make it happen. And you mentioned that the acquiring of clients was a little difficult in that time simply because of the recession going on, but you stayed committed and you stayed focused and grew your firm. So tell us a little bit about your firm now. What is it that you offer? What is it that you're doing for clients? What maybe do you feel distinguishes you from other firms?
Well, to give a little bit of context, I had for a large part of my career, I started as a bookkeeping firm, then added tax, then added payroll. I got into tax strategy as work as well. But over the last year, last 2 years, I've really tried to transition more into consulting work. One of the things I learned from doing the tax strategy work was the most valuable piece of what I was doing was really the advice I was giving. And so through the tax strategy work I did, I learned how to price according to the value of the work that I was giving. And so I moved out of, a lot of my work was fixed price before, but it was more based on, okay, I know it's going to take me this amount of time. This is my hourly bill or my hourly rate. Whereas when I moved into billing value-based, it was really based on, okay, this is the result I'm going to give you, and this is the price for me to do that work. And typically they were seeing a 2 to 3x return on the tax strategy work. So allowed me to get a lot higher billable work. It also allowed me to get more creative, but it also allowed me to really move into a place where I recognized that the advice was the more valuable piece of what I was doing.
Excellent. Your story, I think, is so relevant because a lot of people do start into the profession offering either bookkeeping, accounting, or tax services. And as you experience, they kind of, after time, morph in and add in these additional services. But truly today, the big thing as accounting is being commoditized a lot with some of the softwares and such out there, you're finding that the move towards offering value added or value based services is really your opportunity. And as a CPA, as an accounting professional, I'm sure you've had so much experience now that you see opportunities to give advice, give input, and it'd be nice to be paid for those insights.
Yeah.
So if you're in a situation where preparing the financials routinely and you see these things that the business owner is perhaps not noticing, you get to now offer some value-added services that empower you to offer at a fee for a price this insight that allows them to make more intelligent business decisions. So what you're doing here is I think very appropriate. So one of the things that I think we want to hone in on is what changed that allowed you to feel more confident and competent to offer and charge for those value-based services.
Well, through the tax strategy work that I did, that was the first piece of realizing that I could charge for value. And then I've always kind of been involved in different training methods to expand my skills. And so going through the training and certification for the tax strategy really was the whole premise on that. It was go ahead and price based on value and get out of the thinking that you're only worth a certain amount of dollars an hour, because that's not really where your worth is. So, and that was a process. I mean, it ended up being one of those things that at the beginning I would charge $500 for a project, where now the prices, for that similar work would be $5,500. And so it's one of the things that you gradually you realize, if I'm not getting paid this amount of stuff, I don't even want to get started with a client.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth all the work up front to onboard a client and do all that work. And so that also puts me in a point where there's a barrier to entry for even anyone working with me, which I think will lead to being more attractive. But I've got a walkaway price that says if they can't afford this minimum investment, then there's someone else that can be a better provider for them, that can do the compliance work that I really don't want to do.
Yeah, so there's two things that really stood out to me is the fact that it was a mental transition that you had to make over time to really appreciate your own worth and how to price that value. And that's huge. I think a lot of accountants, especially the older ones, where they've been involved with perhaps some hourly pricing or hourly based pricing, you have to really have a mind shift and see your worth differently to be able to charge these kinds of amounts. But the second thing that was really helpful is the fact that you actually got to a point where you recognized that you didn't want or need every client. You were able to be more selective as to who you worked with because you valued more that relationship and experience than the need for you're getting a paying customer today.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the big thing that I'd like to get from you. Reflecting back over the years of having started your business now over 10 years ago and remembering what those pains were, those challenges you faced, and yet the reward that you've now received, what advice would you give to someone who's perhaps starting their own journey and beginning this process of starting their own firm?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just get started. And that's one of those things that you're going to be scared to do it. I will tell you that right after graduate school, I had a mortgage. I had 2 children that were under 2. My wife was at home. I was scared to death. I just remember that part of what I did is I'd get up at 5 in the morning and go for a walk. And, I had a mortgage as well, and I had no money coming in, and I didn't know how things were going to work themselves out. But I drew inspiration on the Apollo program, which was, the going to the moon. And I would watch all these documentaries about it, and it was just like, well, if we could get to the moon, then surely I can get, a little business up and running. And so it was just one of those things that I had confidence that I can make it happen, and I wasn't necessarily concerned about having it all right. So and it was like I was saying, I started off, something at 500, and I even had clients that would come back and it's like, dude, you're charging way too little. You need to raise your prices. And so part of what I think is common, at least what I saw, is that I didn't value what I was giving out as much as the client did. And I probably still leave a lot of money on the table. And over time, I changed that. But I think the biggest thing that made the difference for me was I just started, and I kept at it and kept at it. And action solves a lot of problems.
So one of the things that I think a lot of people experience is, you've brought up pricing, is how do you establish your worth and determine what price points your various products and services are. The second thing is just persistence. You were obviously passionate about what you were doing, but the passion, you supplemented it also with persistence. You were not going to give up. And it's kind of like you were sharing with the Apollo mission. It's, we've got a mission, and by darn, we're going to make this happen. And come heck or high water, we're going to do this today. And so I love that persistence. And so that's really quite helpful. So that's great advice for someone that is, moving forward, getting started, is just to have that, still keep that passion, but also be persistent and don't give up. So here's something that's interesting. I know that in addition to the traditional accounting, bookkeeping, tax services that you're offering, you've been talking about, obviously, the tax advisory work. What can you tell me about Profit First?
Well, Profit First, I really, I first read the book about a year ago. I just finished up tax season. Typically, my experience with tax season is I go through a bit of a depression from being burned out from tax season. For a couple of years, I had in my mind that I wasn't happy with that piece of my business. As far as that's, it got me where I was, so I'm thankful for that, but I knew it's not what I wanted to continue to do in my business. One of the things that about 2 years into my business, I remember looking back and saying, I'm not successful financially. I was losing money, and I just, said, something's got to change. And I remember reading, in The Richest Man in Babylon, to pay yourself first. And at that point, 2 years into the business, I was like, well, no wonder I'm not successful, because I'm not paying myself first. And that was a pivotal change in my business. What I did with that thought is I opened up a second bank account, and every time I got paid by a client, I put 10% of that money into the second bank account so I could live on it. And so that forced my business to only have 90%. And then it got to a situation over time, and I'm giving this as a backstory to what drew me to Profit First, is over time, I learned that I've got to be focused on the profitability of the company. And some other things I found is like, okay, had employees that I didn't hire right, I didn't train right, and I was giving them my paycheck. And so I had to rejigger my business so that I was making sure I got paid. Going back to where I talked about getting fired, one of the huge realizations that I came to was I was responsible for everything in my life to that point. And I had to, and that gave me a lot of control, because if I caused myself to get where I was, I could surely make a change. And, so that responsibility became very important to me. And a year ago, I read Profit First, and for me, that was a lightning in a bottle moment, because the big thing it talked about was using bank accounts to segregate your money. And I'd been doing that for 8 years, and I knew that that was a huge key. And then the whole emphasis on profitability, and further realizing that tax savings were good, but ultimately the true measure of a business success is its profits. And in order for profits to be real, it has to be cash in the bank. I can't tell you how many times I've had run-ins with clients who didn't talk to me all year, then they made a lot of money and spent the money on a Ferrari, for instance, and then they got a tax bill, and then they're upset at me. Well, you didn't talk to me about buying the Ferrari. So a lot of the proactive things and approaches with Profit First that I have been a big believer in, I was able to get the training through Profit First that even back to when I was running my cleaning business, of running a business profitably, a lot of things of what I wanted to accomplish as a business advisor really crystallized in the Profit First method.
So this is something that I've heard time and time again, and yours is a great example of it. Is you saw the value in it in the sense that first and foremost, it was something personally you were already kind of doing, and it was familiar. So when you read the book, it resonated with you, and the philosophy. It wasn't a divergence from what you're traditionally doing. It was basically a confirmation of something you were personally doing and a further explanation of how you could leverage it. And then the second thing that I really loved about what you shared is, as a business owner, this related to you. You could actually see its application. It wasn't just as an accountant, some new creative way of trying to explain your services and what it is you do with clients. It was genuinely something that you were actually experiencing, and it applied to you personally. So this is perfect. So now you obviously take it, resonates with you, you adopt Profit First, you incorporate it into your services. How has that changed your firm?
Well, for 2 years prior to it, as I've been talking about, I wanted to get out of the tax business, because the inherent nature of taxes are, most people don't want to talk about taxes. They don't want to deal with taxes. They hire a tax professional to take care of the taxes. I'd gotten to the point where I'd really wanted to transition to more of an advisory business. And the Profit First gave me a framework for delivering the advice. It also simplified things. And I can say that, either we're profitable or we're not. It's kind of like, pregnancy. Either someone's pregnant or they're not. Either you have cash in your bank or you don't. And so it's kind of black and white. But you've got an overall lens that you can look at. And it also simplifies what you're looking at from the money side of the business. Typically, when you're looking at financial statements, if you're looking at just the balance sheet and the income statement, that can be 3 and 4 pages. By using Profit First, I can get down to 4 numbers that dictate the health of the business. And so for me to explain what's important in the business, it's a lot easier to focus on those things than to say, okay, well, all these other things. Now, the implementation in making the business more profitable gets a lot more in depth, but at least we have a very simple way to look at the business that I've found very refreshing in the way that I'm able to interact with my clients.
So now with Profit First, you've got this structure, this format that you can follow to intelligently bring to your clients this advisory service that you're wanting to do, but now you've got the confidence and the competence, the structure to deliver it in. And when you've got that, I agree, you're able to more confidently give your clients this service because it's structured, it's organized, it's something that you can put your teeth into, and I like that. So let's talk then about advice that you would give to another CPA, another accountant, another accounting firm as to they're like you, they have clients, they're working in their business. What advice would you give them as they're looking for that next opportunity to offer additional services in their firm or take their practice to another level?
Well, the first thing is to determine what they want out of their business, and, because depending on what you personally want out of business, that's going to direct a lot of things. So I have come to the decision that I'm not really interested in building a huge firm. I've made the decision to be more of a solo practitioner, a boutique firm. I'll add in as I need to, but that gives me a lot of flexibility from a cost structure. And so, you can look at my firm based on where I want to go. To have a firm with multiple employees, to have the same owner's compensation that I've got, they would have to be a $2 million firm. And so, and this is kind of that's the first piece. If you want to grow a great firm, I mean, there's lots of people that want to grow a firm and employ people and all that. So that's one thing to think about, is think about what the end that you want. And some people, for me, I like the advice piece, but there's other people that love tax. And so you really kind of have to do that self-analysis of what you want. I will tell you that the advice piece, I think, is the most valuable thing that we give clients. It's probably the least given, because the compliance piece can become so time-consuming. And if there's a emphasis on growth, because we've got to make payroll and this other stuff, and this is true for any other business, getting to the core value that you're providing the customer or the client gets lost in, in the day-to-day stuff. So it does take some time. You do have to take some time to figure out really what you want to be as a business or in a provider. So that's the first step. And then figure out how you're going to deliver that, but also make sure that you're doing it in a way that's profitable. I mean, I can remember some of the analysis that I did where I do monthly bookkeeping for a client, and after paying my staff to do it, I was losing money on that job. And so I had to go back to that client and say, hey, listen, we're not making money on this. It's a lot more work than we initially said. This is what the price has got to be. Well, that person left, but I was better off not having that client. So I think there's got to be a huge emphasis on being profitable with everything. One of the big mistakes I made early on is writing off time and underbilling. And that was due to lack of self-image, where I said, well, it shouldn't have taken that much. And the fact of the matter was I was probably, 70% or 60% of what other people were charging. But, so taking, and one of the things I did is I had a fear of raising my price from 100 an hour to 125. And I said to myself, well, if I'm scared to do that, that means I probably need to do it. And there was no backlash. So I've found that very few times when I've raised my prices that very few people push back on it. So there should be a consistent approach to raising prices. And then also, if you get to a point where you don't feel like you can raise the price, look for ways to increase the price by offering something more valuable.
Very, very good. So two things that I'm hearing there. First and foremost, the advice to work on your business with the intent of saying, what do you want your firm to be? You've chosen to, at this point, be a solo entrepreneur. That's great. As a solo practitioner, you've got basically more control over your relationships with the clients and so forth. So that's wonderful. For someone else who's choosing to, let's say, offer bookkeeping services or advisory services or grow their firm and have a partner everybody just needs to do that personal reflection and decide what do they want, and most importantly, in time, whether it be a year or 3 years, what are you building or moving towards? What are you
Yeah.
trying to do so that you're intentionally taking on and working with the clients as you want to? And that's, I think, a very good piece of advice. And then your comments about pricing, you're right. I think there's a lot to be said about intelligently pricing and knowing why your fees are what they are. Too often I'm talking to accounting professionals and I ask why their fees are what they are. And it's really just because it's, I guess it's, I thought, and really there's a more intelligent way of going about that. And so I like how you were just sharing, it needs to be something that's conscious and that you're pushing the envelope on, and you're really striving to, if you can't just raise the price, add more value so you can justifiably take that price to that point. So very good advice. Now, here's the one thing I'd like to just ask, since you did bring up Profit First, just real quickly, tell me about your experience working with Profit First, getting the training, the support there.
I'll have to say that Profit First Professionals is one of the best organizations I've gotten involved with for a couple reasons. The training is really top notch. They've built out a very good delivery system for it, and have identified, and it gets better every year. And the certification process takes you incrementally so that you can go at your own speed. The really nice thing is they've got the guides that you work with that really help you connect the dots, that, or at least they have helped me connect the dots and validate some of my thinking, because I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about going down this direction. And they'll push back at times and say, well, no, think about this or that. But ultimately, it's your business. But both the support in the materials and the human capital, or the team members they have there, they've really done a great job of building and they like to talk about this, that we're building a family environment here. And there's been times where people have had death in the families, and gifts are sent to those people. And it's a small thing, but it ends up being a very meaningful thing, that someone thought enough to say, hey, listen, we're there, we want to convey our condolences. And that's not necessarily a business thing, but I remember one of the things in business school that one of my professors said is that business is built around personal relationships. And so there's a continually improvement in what we do there, which appeals very strongly to the way I've tried to build my business, always making what I'm doing better. And so it's one of those things that you got two levels you can be at. And so start at one level, and if a mastery level makes sense to you, go to that level. But we're not going to push you one way or the other. We're really here to support you how you want to be supported.
That is excellent. One of the things that I can definitely say is working with Aaron and Ron and Mike and Billy Ann, Mike. They're excellent. The team there is just phenomenal, and I love the fact that when we enroll people, we're able to give them those support coaches that they're needing. And you're right. It's even beyond that. There's that community that is also made available, and there's a lot to be said about just having, as an accounting professional, this resource behind you, this team, and it's very empowering. I think it's very supportive, and it's at that personal level as well. So well said. So here's my last question for you. It's just basically an idea question of, where do you see the accounting profession going in the coming years? What's on the horizon? What's catching your attention?
I think there's going to be more computer automation in the way things are doing. We're already seeing that with bank feeds. Some softwares are not. Some softwares will connect directly with the banks. Other times you can import the bank statements. So there's a huge efficiency and effectiveness that what ordinarily would take someone 3 hours can be done in 15 minutes. And so the compliance piece is getting more automated. The computers are making that. And I think we're going to be seeing a huge shift in, if you stick with the data entry piece, you may be out of a job in 10 years. And quite frankly, I don't know that most business owners really value data entry per se. And so there's got to be a move to being, I think you've got to move to being an advisor where you're taking that information and saying, okay, Mr. Business Owner, let's help you accomplish your goals. That's where I think that we can be very valuable, especially since most people have trouble with money. And that's what I'm realizing more and more as I get into my career, is that it's such a confusing thing. Most money purchases are made emotionally. And so being objective about money, helping people simplify those decisions, it can be, there's a lot of power in that. And if if you can come across objective and make sure that you're maintaining a trustworthiness, and that's going to be that helping them make those money decisions, I think, is going to be where you're going to be most valuable.
Well said. Yeah, the change or evolution going on in the accounting profession now, especially with all the different automations, is truly getting away from the data entry and the hands-on preparing of financials to now being the expert, the advisor as to what each company needs to have as an infrastructure to capture that data, pull it in so that they can more and more have real-time information. And then your role as the advisor is to help them understand and manage that infrastructure so that they can make those intelligent business decisions. And that's where your advice comes in. That's where that consultative opportunity presents itself to be paid at that level. So well said. So Damon, congratulations on the practice that you have. More importantly, on the journey you've experienced and getting to the point that you are. I really commend you, because so many people really are striving to have what you've accomplished, and you're there. And so that's been wonderful. Your thoughts regarding the various things such as starting the business, growing the business, as well as profit first, very much appreciated. Do you have any closing thoughts, any parting thoughts that you'd like to share?
Just do it. I mean, just get out there and start doing something new. One of the things I started doing a year ago is spending an hour on something every day to improve the business. And that gave me a focus where I made a little bit of a change every day, but over 3-4 months, it's pretty astounding what you can accomplish if you spend 5 hours a week focused on something to improve your business. And if you can't do an hour a day, do half an hour a day, or just do an hour a week. So do something and have a consistent effort to improve the business somehow, because that's what's going to make you more valuable.
Very good. You can't be status quo. You can't be complacent. You've got to be proactive. I like that. Yeah. That's good. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for obviously listening in. I'm sure you got some of the things that I did out of this discussion with Damon, because truly starting a business can be hard, but it's worth it. Be patient, be persistent, and keep that passion alive. And more importantly, be open to new ways to evolve and offer your services more value-added programs and services that they can benefit from. So with that all in mind, I'm going to be putting down in the descriptions a few things to help complement today's discussion, one of which will be the pricing discussion to help you realize or see how you can be pricing your services. We'll also be providing a book, basic or In the Black, that you can get, as well as Profit First, which Damon mentioned. So just look down in the descriptions for that information so you can click on those and get what we were talking about, a little bit more context to all of that. And with that in mind, just remember this: if it's about accounting, it is universal. So enjoy yourselves, and thank you, Damon, for your time.